Game Changers, the 7 most influential scoliosis research studies. Scoliosis has always been a bit of a mystery. Doctors, parents, and patients all ask the same questions. Why did this happen? Will it get worse? Can we fix it? For centuries, the answers were based more on observation than science. Ancient Greek physicians like Hippocrates described spines twisting like a serpent. In the Middle Ages, healers tried to pull the spine straight using traction devices. In the 20th century, we saw rigid braces, steel rods, and later titanium hardware to hold the spine in place. These approaches focused on one thing, the curve itself. The spine was treated as a crooked beam that needed straightening. But over time, it became clear that there was more to the story. Many people with severe curves lived normal lives without treatment. Others with smaller curves saw them worsen quickly. Some had pain, others didn't. Traditional thinking couldn't explain these differences. Something deeper was going on. Something inside the body's systems that was influencing the shape and behavior of the spine. In the last 2 decades, a handful of powerful studies have changed the way scientists and doctors think about scoliosis. They come from different fields: orthopedics, chiropractic care, genetics, neuroscience, and nutritional science. But they all share one thing. They challenge the old bones-only view of scoliosis. Instead, they reveal it as a condition shaped by a mix of genetics, brain chemistry, growth patterns, and body mechanics. This book tells the stories of 7 of these studies. They are not just data on a page. They are game changers that have affected real people, shaped clinical decisions, and opened the door to new treatments. Number 1. The Untreated Scoliosis Study, 50 Years of Follow-up. Our first story begins in a time before modern scoliosis treatments. In the mid-20th century, many people with scoliosis didn't wear braces, take supplements, or have surgery, because those options weren't widely available. Some doctors decided to track these patients over decades, recording their health, function, and life satisfaction. 50 years later, the results were published. The findings were surprising. Most patients lived normal lifespans, even those with larger curves. Yes, some had back pain or reduced lung function, but they worked, raised families, and stayed active. The doom and gloom predictions about scoliosis weren't always true. This study, published in the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery, changed the conversation. It showed that treatment decisions shouldn't be based on fear alone. Doctors began to think more carefully about which patients truly needed aggressive treatment and which could be safely monitored. For families, this meant less pressure to rush into surgery just in case. 2. Chiropractic rehabilitation until skeletal maturity. Fast forward to modern times. Teenagers near the end of their growth are often told that if their curves are still under a certain size, they're out of the woods. But research shows that's not always true. Curves can still progress into adulthood. A team of chiropractors and rehabilitation specialists decided to test whether targeted therapy could still make a difference after growth stopped. They designed a program that combined core muscle strengthening, spinal flexibility work, balance training, and postural corrections. Patients came in for intensive sessions, followed by structured home exercises. The results were encouraging. More than half of the participants saw their Cobb angle improve by several degrees. Many maintained their results even after treatment ended. Parents reported better posture and confidence in their teens, and the teens themselves noticed less fatigue and discomfort. This study, published in Clinics in Practice, challenged the idea that nothing can be done after skeletal maturity. It showed that the spine is still responsive to the right kind of training, even when growth has finished. 3. Long-term surgical outcomes. For decades, spinal fusion surgery has been seen as the final answer for large scoliosis curves. Surgeons can reduce the curve dramatically in a single operation, and the results on an X-ray are striking. But what happens 10 or 20 years later? A group of orthopedic researchers followed patients long after their surgeries, measuring not just curve size, but also pain levels, mobility, activity limitations, and overall quality of life. Their findings were more complicated than expected. Yes, surgery often improved appearance and stopped the curve from getting worse, but it didn't always eliminate pain or improve long-term function. Some patients faced hardware breakage, adjacent segment disease, or needed additional surgeries. A few even reported that they would have chosen differently if they had known the long-term trade-offs. This research didn't condemn surgery, but it encouraged a more cautious and individualized approach. For patients and families, it became a reminder that surgery is a tool, not a cure-all. 4. Functional genomic variants in scoliosis. While surgeons were measuring outcomes and chiropractors were testing rehab methods, geneticists were looking deeper, at the DNA level. A groundbreaking study examined the genetic blueprints of Caucasian patients with scoliosis and compared them to healthy controls. Instead of looking for one scoliosis gene, the researchers searched for patterns of genetic variants, tiny changes in DNA that can influence how the body develops and functions. They found that scoliosis patients had higher rates of certain variants affecting hormone balance, bone growth, muscle tone, and nerve communication. This discovery reframed scoliosis as not just a mechanical problem, but a biological one. It suggested that scoliosis might be the visible end result of dozens of small internal factors working together over time. For example, one patient might have gene variants that slow bone growth but speed up hormonal changes during puberty, creating a perfect storm for curve progression. Another might have genetic differences that affect balance reflexes, leading to uneven muscle forces on the spine. 5. Neurotransmitter patterns in scoliosis. Around the same time, neuroscientists began asking, could the brain and its chemical messengers play a role in scoliosis? A research team measured neurotransmitter levels, specifically serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine in patients with scoliosis, and compared them to levels in people without the condition. They found consistent differences. Scoliosis patients often had lower serotonin, important for muscle tone and stability, and higher norepinephrine, linked to stress response and reflex timing. This was a breakthrough because it connected scoliosis to the body's control system, the brain and nerves, not just its structure. It suggested that the way the brain controls posture and balance might be tuned differently in scoliosis patients. Clinically, this opens the door to new possibilities. Treatments that improve neurotransmitter balance could one day help prevent curve progression or make rehabilitation more effective. 6. Specific genetic variant combinations. A recent study looked at whether certain genetic differences could make adolescent idiopathic scoliosis, AIS, a type of spine curve that develops in teens without a known cause, more likely to worsen over time. The researchers focused on two specific genes, COMT and MTHFR. Both genes can have variations that reduce how well they work. Based on their genetic results, patients were divided into two groups. Group 1 included those with low-activity versions of both COMT and MTHFR, while Group 2 included those with at least one gene in a normal or high-functioning form. The study involved 72 teens with AIS who had at least 2 spine X-rays taken during their growing years. Patients with scoliosis caused by nerve problems or other syndromes were not included. The researchers tracked whether the spine curve, measured by the Cobb angle, increased by at least 20 degrees or if the patient needed spinal surgery before finishing growth. Results showed a clear difference between the two groups. In Group 1, 78% of the teens, 32 out of 41, experienced scoliosis progression, compared to 48.4%, 15 out of 31, in Group 2. This difference was statistically significant, with a p-value of 0.009, meaning the results were very unlikely to be due to chance. The findings suggest that teens with both low-activity COMT and MTHFR genes face a much higher risk of their scoliosis worsening. This research highlights the potential value of genetic testing in predicting scoliosis progression and identifying patients who may need earlier or more aggressive treatment to help prevent curve advancement. 7. Melatonin, vitamin D, and calcium for bone health. Melatonin is often called the sleep hormone, but it also plays a role in bone formation and muscle repair. Vitamin D helps the body absorb calcium, which is critical for strong bones. A recent study tested whether giving scoliosis patients a combination of melatonin, vitamin D, and calcium could improve bone health and slow curve progression. Over several months, researchers tracked bone density, curve size, and overall well-being. The results were promising, especially in patients who had low baseline levels of these nutrients. Bone density improved, and some curves remained stable when they might otherwise have worsened. While not a standalone cure, this approach offered a safe, low-cost way to support the body's natural defenses against curve progression. For patients, it was a reminder that sometimes small, everyday actions, like correcting a vitamin deficiency, can make a meaningful difference. Pulling it all together, a new way of thinking. These 6 studies come from different angles: long-term observation, rehabilitation, surgery, genetics, brain chemistry, and nutrition. But together, they paint a more complete picture of scoliosis. We now see it not as a single thing that happens to the spine, but as the end result of a chain of events involving growth patterns, genetic predispositions, neurotransmitter balance, and physical mechanics. This means treatment can be more personalized. A patient with a strong genetic risk pattern in certain neurotransmitter imbalances might benefit from early rehab, nutritional support, and close monitoring. Another with stable curves and low biological risk might simply need lifestyle guidance and periodic check-ins. This shift from one-size-fits-all treatment to individualized care is why these studies are true game changers.